Get out!
Get out. The word landed without force, without heat. That was what made it worse. Mara stood in the center of the living room, one hand resting unconsciously against the curve of her stomach. 7 months. Her other hand clutched the strap of a small handbag, the only thing she had managed to grab before the room turned against her. Daniel didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "I said, leave," he repeated, eyes fixed somewhere over her shoulder, as if she were already gone. The house was immaculate. Polished floors, neutral colors, framed wedding photos still on the walls, proof that only minutes ago this place had been her home. His mother sat rigidly on the couch, lips pressed thin, approval barely concealed. His sister leaned casually against the doorway, phone tilted just enough to record. Mara looked at them one by one. "I don't understand," she said quietly. "What is this about?" Daniel's mother reached for the folder on the table and slid it forward. Papers spilled slightly over the edge. Bank statements, highlighted numbers, printed emails stripped of context. "She's been hiding money," the woman said, "transferring funds behind your back." "That's not true," Mara replied. Her voice remained calm, though her pulse had begun to hammer in her ears. "Those payments were medical." "We've heard enough," Daniel cut in. He picked up the folder, flipped through it without really looking, then dropped it back onto the table like it weighed nothing. "You've embarrassed this family," he said. "And now it ends." Mara's hand tightened over her stomach. "Daniel," she said, "I'm carrying your child." He finally looked at her. There was no anger there, no conflict, only distance. "That doesn't give you the right to steal from me." The word hit harder than a shout. Steal. His sister laughed softly, the sound sharp in the quiet room. "Pregnant women commit crimes too, you know." Mara turned to her. "You know that isn't true." The sister raised her phone higher. "Say that again." Daniel's mother stood and adjusted her jacket. "You came into this house with nothing, and you will leave the same way." Daniel reached for a pen. The paper he signed was not divorce paperwork. It was an eviction notice. He signed quickly, no hesitation, no glance in her direction. "You have until tonight," he said. "Take your things and go." Outside, rain had started falling, light at first, persistent. Mara stepped down the front stairs with one small suitcase. The door closed behind her, soft and final. Laughter drifted through the glass as the lock slid into place. She stood there for a moment, rain soaking into her shoes, the weight of disbelief pressing down harder than the pregnancy ever had. Then she walked. She didn't know someone across the street had seen everything. She didn't know that the story had already begun to move. That night, she slept on a bus bench. The city was quieter after midnight. Streetlights flickered. Cars passed without slowing. She curled slightly on her side, one arm wrapped around her stomach, the other around her bag. Fear came in waves. Where would she go tomorrow? How long could she last like this? What if the baby came early? She didn't cry. Crying wasted energy. At dawn, she washed her face in a public restroom and tied her hair back neatly. She smoothed her dress, lifted her chin, and went to work. The diner was already busy. Plates clattered. Orders were shouted. The manager glanced at her belly, frowned briefly, then turned away. She worked without complaint, moved carefully, smiled when spoken to. At the end of the shift, the manager handed her a small envelope. "Shortened hours," he said. "You understand?" She nodded. By the third night, her back couldn't take the bench anymore. She found a women's shelter on the edge of the city. Overcrowded, loud, but warm. She took the top bunk. Every night, she rested her hand over her stomach and whispered the same promise, "I'm here." Weeks passed. She cleaned offices at night, marble floors, empty conference rooms, reflections of herself in glass walls, tired, thinner, still standing. She saved every coin in an envelope hidden deep in her bag. She avoided hospitals, not because she didn't need care, but because she couldn't afford the questions. What she didn't know was that someone had begun asking questions for her. The man who had witnessed her eviction had not been a neighbor. He had been waiting for a driver when he saw the suitcase, the pregnancy, the way no one followed her. His name was Elias Crowne. He noticed details most people missed. Days later, he sat in the back booth of the diner, watching Mara work. He saw how she moved slower now, how she pressed her palm against the counter when she thought no one was looking. He didn't speak to her. He didn't need to. He asked his assistant to look into her name. The report came back thin, too thin. No debt trail, no digital footprint where one should exist. Medical transfers with sealed origins. That alone made him pause. Meanwhile, the pressure returned. Daniel filed a formal complaint. Fraud, financial misconduct. The letter arrived folded inside a plain envelope. Mara read it once, then again. If it stood, she could lose shelter access, aid, any chance at stability. She folded the paper and placed it carefully away. That evening, the warehouse supervisor called her aside. "We received a call," he said. "Said there might be legal issues." She met his eyes. "I've never been arrested." He shifted. "Still, we can't take risks." He handed her her final pay. Outside, the night felt heavier. Her savings envelope thinner than planned. The shelter's timeline closing in. For the first time, doubt crept in. Not anger, just exhaustion. Across town, Daniel paced his living room. "She's still standing," his sister snapped. "Why?" His mother narrowed her eyes. "Because she's hiding something." The next morning, a social service worker arrived at the shelter. "There's been a report," she said gently. "We have to follow procedure." Procedure meant waiting. That night, as Mara sat alone on the shelter steps, Elias Crowne sat beside her. "Long day?" he asked. She nodded. "Long year." "You don't ask for help," he said. "I don't trust it when it's loud." He smiled faintly. "Fair." They sat in silence. "I knew someone once," he said, "who lost everything because powerful people decided she was inconvenient." Mara said nothing. "She survived," he continued, "by outlasting them." Hita stood. "If anyone asks, we've never met." Days later, Daniel's lawyer requested a formal hearing, public, recorded. Mara stood outside the building on the morning of it, one hand on her stomach, breathing steadily. Across the street, Daniel arrived confident, family in tow. Inside, the room filled. No one noticed the man who took a seat near the back. Elias Crowne folded his hands and waited, because truth did not need to rush. It only needed space. The hearing room felt smaller than it looked. Not cramped, measured. Mara sat alone at one side of the table, her hands folded loosely in her lap. She kept her shoulders back, her breathing slow. Every movement was deliberate now, conserved. Across from her, Daniel sat straight-backed beside his lawyer, confidence settling easily into his posture. His mother sat behind him, arms crossed. His sister stood near the aisle, phone already angled low, recording. Daniel did not look at Mara. The mediator cleared her throat. "We're here to address allegations of financial misconduct filed by Mr. Daniel Hayes against Ms. Mara Hayes." The lawyer spoke smoothly, as if this were routine. "My client alleges that during the marriage, Ms. Hayes transferred funds without consent, concealed financial activity, and misrepresented expenses." Copies slid across the table. Highlighted numbers, partial statements, enough to suggest guilt, not enough to prove innocence. The mediator turned to Mara. "Miss Hayes?" Mara lifted her gaze. "I never stole anything," she said. Her voice was steady. "Every transfer was for medical expenses." The lawyer smiled faintly. "Do you have documentation to support that claim?" A pause. "I don't," Mara said calmly. "Not with me." Daniel exhaled. His sister's mouth curved upward. The mediator nodded slowly. "Then we'll proceed with—" "Actually," a voice said from the back of the room, "she does." Chairs shifted, heads turned. The man who stood did not rush. He adjusted his jacket once, then stepped forward. "My name is Elias Crowne," he said evenly. "I'm here as an independent third-party witness." The mediator frowned. "Your relevance?" Elias placed a folder on the table. "I oversee international financial audits. During a routine review, discrepancies surfaced, not in Ms. Hayes's behavior, but in how her actions were reported." Daniel's lawyer stiffened. "This is highly irregular." Elias met his gaze. "So is altering context." The mediator opened the folder. Her expression changed. "These medical invoices," she said slowly, "they match the amounts cited in the complaint." "Yes," Elias replied. "And they originate from a protected medical trust, not marital assets." Daniel leaned forward. "That's impossible." Elias turned to him. "It isn't," he continued, calm and precise. "Ms. Hayes received treatment abroad years before this marriage. Her care was funded through a private endowment. The transfers in question were reimbursements, released only after verified treatment milestones." The mediator flipped another page. "Then why were they flagged as suspicious?" Elias slid a second document forward, a signed authorization. The room went quiet. The mediator looked up sharply. "This approval came from a third party, Ms. Hayes's sister-in-law." The phone slipped from the sister's hand and hit the floor. "That's not," she began. "Enough," the mediator said. Daniel stood abruptly. "This is being twisted." Elias didn't raise his voice. "No, it's being clarified." He gestured to the final pages. Ms. Hayes's records were sealed at her request after repeated attempts by a former employer to control her medical access. That employer is currently under investigation. The mediator closed the folder slowly. "The allegations of fraud are unsubstantiated," she said. "In fact, evidence suggests misrepresentation by the claimant's side." Daniel's mother went pale. Daniel said nothing. The mediator looked at Mara. "Ms. Hayes, you are cleared of all accusations." Mara nodded once. That was all. No reaction. No relief loud enough to hear. Just release. Outside, the air felt lighter. Daniel didn't follow her. Neither did his family. Elias stepped beside her on the courthouse steps. "You didn't tell them who you were," he said quietly. "I didn't need to," Mara replied. He handed her a card. "There's an apartment. Temporary. Close to a hospital that already has your records." She hesitated. "Not charity," he added. "A bridge." She took it. Weeks later, sunlight filled a small apartment. Clean, quiet. A crib stood assembled near the window. Mara stood there, one hand resting over her stomach, watching the city move below. She had work now. Steady, quiet, no suspicion, no explanations required. She had stability. Daniel's world shrank. His sister's credibility vanished. His mother's influence faded. No spectacle followed. Only absence. Mara didn't look back. Because dignity didn't need revenge. Truth didn't rush. It arrived. If this story moved you, like and subscribe for more hidden truth stories.